Australia and other NATO countries have agreed to transition control of Afghanistan security to the country's forces by 2014. ABC correspondent Philip Williams is at the NATO conference in Lisbon. He sat down with Prime Minister Julia Gillard to talk about the future plans for mission in Afghanistan.
Welcome, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
I think there has to be some confusion about what's going on here, because at one level we're saying 2014 we're out, and another we're saying no, we're staying for as long as it matters, for as long as we're needed. Which is the reality?
I don't think that there is a confusion. I think we're talking about different stages of our engagement in Afghanistan. President Karzai has said that it's his goal to see security leadership go to Afghan local forces by the end of 2014, and the acknowledgement here at this meeting has been that transition can start early next year. We've pressed the political start button on transition. It will happen place by place as Afghan security capacity develops. But what this meeting's also saying is beyond the security assistance in that sense, there will still need to be a partnership with Afghanistan, which is why the terminology an enduring partnership is being used.
It seems a bit loose though. I mean, it's all dependent on the security situation, governance with the Afghan government, the police force, the army. It's all very loose. So why pick a date like 2014 when we can't guarantee that's what will happen?
It was President Karzai who specified that goal for his country, and of course we and the other international forces are there at the invitation of the Afghan people and under the ambit of the UN. So President Karzai is expressing his goal about Afghanistan taking over responsibility for its own security. What is being said here at this meeting is on all fours with what I said to the Australian Parliament when I opened the debate on Afghanistan. We would be engaged, working hard on security, training the Afghan National Army, training police, fighting the counterinsurgency. Our estimates are 2 to 4 years. President Karzai's goal is the end of 2014. But beyond that, we will continue to be engaged with Afghanistan.
The reality is, isn't it, surely, that if things aren't going well, 2014 we'll still be there with combat troops?
Well, this is going to be a conditions-based transition. It'll happen district by district, place by place. But here at this meeting this weekend, NATO, working with the partners more broadly, including Australia that support the International Security Assistance Force, have said that we can start transition in early 2011 and work through. It's
a start date, but we still don't know the end date, do we? We don't know when the last Australian combat troop will be coming home.
We have a defined strategy starting early next year and working through. I mean, this is conditions-based. It's got to be like that.
So we could be there for years beyond that.
I don't think that it helps to just, cast around in this way. I think we've got to be clear what is the task and then what is the best advice about how long it's going to take.
But I guess
we know what the task is. The task is training, it's mentoring, it's enabling the Afghan security forces to take the lead. What's the best estimate of the time? Well, our own Defence Forces said consistently 2 to 4 years. That fits with President Karzai's goal of the end of 2014.
Now, part of the process is a political solution, and that involves possibly negotiations with the Taliban. It's conceivable that in the future Taliban members will be sitting in a parliament or will be part of a government. Can you stomach that?
I think once again we've got to be very clear. Obviously there are many elements of the forces that have been involved with the Taliban, of the people who have been involved with the Taliban. If you like, this is a many-headed beast. and what is being suggested through political reconciliation is there may be some elements prepared to lay down arms and work within the ambit of the new Afghan constitution and democratic arrangements. Now that needs to be a process under Afghan leadership, President Karzai and his people working in dialogue. At the same time, there are reintegration efforts, people who have been perhaps engaged locally in some work against international forces, but who will not cease to do that, be able to reintegrate into civil society and behave properly. So that work is also happening locally.
In the meantime, of course, Australian troops are deployed in danger and some sadly lose their lives. Many Prime Ministers before you have said that those sorts of decisions weigh more heavily than any others. How do you cope emotionally when you hear the terrible news that an Australian soldier's been killed?
It's obviously terrible and devastating whenever we get news that one of our soldiers has been killed or injured, and we've had that news far, far too many times, particularly this year.
Because it's a very, very difficult call for a Prime Minister, for a leader to make, isn't it? And you make decisions, they are sadly life and death decisions.
You're called on to make those decisions, but why are we in Afghanistan? Well, we've got to remember we are talking about a country in which terrorists were trained who came and took Australian lives. We lost Australians in 9/11. We lost over 100 Australians since in terrorist incidents, most particularly the Bali bombing, and many of those events had links to Afghanistan and training in Afghanistan. So it's in the interests of the safety and security of Australians that we no longer have Afghanistan as a safe haven and training ground for terrorists who would come and take Australian lives. So we are there to deny it being that safe haven. We are also there under our alliance arrangements with the United States. They faced a devastating attack on their soil with the World Trade Center attack. It took Australian lives, it took thousands of American lives.
I guess, though, it's a hard sell in some respects that here we are 9 years on, we're looking at another 4 years perhaps, maybe more, longer than more than double the Second World War. Do you understand when Australian people say, we're sick of this, there's nothing in this for us, we're sick of our troops dying?
I would say to Australians in those circumstances, and I do understand that people want answers, clear answers to the questions about why we're there. People would remember where they were when they first heard the news, for example, of the Bali bombing. They'd remember where they were when they first heard the news of 9/11, and people would remember how they felt on those occasions. Well, we know that terrorism was trained and sponsored through safe havens in Afghanistan. We are there to deny terrorism those safe havens. That's in the interests of Australians. And I've had the opportunity personally to talk to the families who have suffered the greatest losses, talk to the families of our soldiers who have been killed in Afghanistan. And what's always amazed me is their determination to see Australia continue its mission in Afghanistan. We best honour those losses by seeing the mission through. It's an important one.
Of course, we cast back to the late 60s and there was that transition, the Vietnamisation it was called, in the Vietnam War, and that was seen at the time as the right thing and a pathway to success there. It proved tragically wrong, and we'd left and it fell to the communist forces. How can you be sure that the same thing won't happen in Afghanistan?
I don't think the analogy works. I just don't think it works at all. This conflict has started for a different reason and it is of a different order. President Karzai has sat at this meeting with us today, here representing the people of Afghanistan. And yes, he wants to see them engage in their own sovereignty, providing their own security. We want to see that too. We want to see President Karzai and Afghanistan Afghan people in security leadership in their own nation. That's what we are working towards.
Do you trust him?
We are there at the invitation of the Afghan people. What I'd say about President Karzai is he has work to do on anti-corruption measures, and that has also been raised during the course of the discussions here. It was something that I raised with him when I met him. He does have work to do on governance building and anti-corruption, but we will be there doing the work we're doing, training the Afghan National Army, in enabling transition place by place to Afghan security leadership.
Prime Minister, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.